Sephew stood in the middle of the birthday hall, frozen, his father's words slicing through him like a blade. Another man's mistake. Bayo spat into the microphone, loud enough for every guest to hear. Laughter rolled across the room. Whispers followed. And Sephew just stared at the cake he no longer had the strength to blow candles on. But as tears blurred his vision, a man in a tailored navy suit stood quietly at the door. A man who looked exactly like him. A man who said only one sentence when their eyes met. "Son, I've been looking for you for 18 years. And that moment changed everything. Sephew had been waiting for his 18th birthday with a mix of excitement and nervousness, hoping for a calm celebration, maybe just a few smiles from his family. The hall was decorated with bright balloons, sparkling lights, and a big chocolate cake at the center. Friends and relatives laughed and chatted, but Sephew felt a knot in his stomach, a small warning that something could go wrong. Then suddenly, everything fell apart. His father, Bayo, who had been drinking, staggered to the microphone. He sneered at Sephew and spoke words that cut deeper than any knife. "You are not my child," he announced loudly, the voice full of mockery. He didn't stop there. He called Sephew a burden, a constant reminder of someone else's failure. And then the cruelest words of all. Another man's mistake. The laughter from the guests echoed around the hall like a cruel soundtrack to Sephew's heartbreak. Sephew's mother, Tisa, stood frozen, tears in her eyes, helpless to stop the humiliation. He felt the weight of every gaze on him, every whisper, every shocked expression, pressing down until he could barely breathe. His hands trembled, his chest tightened, and the world seemed to tilt. He couldn't stay another second. Without a word, he turned and ran from the hall, ignoring the shocked cries and the confused stares. Outside, the cold night hit him like a wall. The icy air stung his face, but it was nothing compared to the burning ache inside. His legs moved on their own, carrying him away from the people who were supposed to love him, leaving behind the noise, the laughter, and the cake he never got to blow out. Alone in the darkness, Sephew let the tears finally fall, feeling everything he had held in for years pour out at once. In that moment, everything he thought he knew about his family and his life shattered, leaving only emptiness and the question of who he really was. Sephew didn't know how long he had walked through the cold streets, his mind spinning with his father's words. Every step felt heavier than the last, and he didn't even notice when someone quietly approached him. A man in a sharp navy suit was standing a few feet away, watching him with calm, steady eyes. Sephew froze, feeling a strange pull. The man looked exactly like him. Same dark eyes, same strong jaw, the same way of standing that somehow felt familiar. The man spoke softly, almost like a whisper carried by the wind. "Son, I've been looking for you for 18 years, he said. Sephew blinked, unsure if he was dreaming. His heart raced, confusion and hope twisting together in a way he had never felt. The man introduced himself as Baiko. He didn't rush into explanations or promises. Instead, he offered a quiet truth that seemed impossible to believe. Baiko told Sephew that long before Bayo ever came into their lives, he and Sephew's mother, Tisa, had been deeply in love. They were happy, dreaming of a family, until her strict parents forced them apart. Baiko explained that Tisa had been told he died in a terrible accident. She had grieved, and in her vulnerable state, Bayo stepped in, claiming he could care for her and the child she would have. He married her just months later, pretending to offer safety while taking advantage of her heartbreak. Baiko's voice trembled slightly when he talked about the years he spent searching, tracking leads, sending letters he never expected to reach her. He had thought his child had never survived, and that thought had haunted him every single day. Now, seeing Sephew standing in the cold, he felt a mix of relief and sorrow that words could hardly describe. Sephew's mind raced. Could this be true? Could this man really be his father? The man his mother had loved, the man who had been searching for him his entire life? Baiko reached out, not demanding trust, only offering an invitation to know the truth, to understand what had been stolen from him. He didn't offer money, fame, or anything else, just the reality of who Sephew really was and where he came from. Sephew felt tears prick his eyes again, but this time they were different. They weren't just for shame or pain. They were for hope, for a chance to finally belong, for the possibility that after 18 years of lies and loss, he might finally meet the person who had been waiting for him all along. The cold night no longer felt empty, and for the first time since the party, Sephew felt a flicker of something he had almost forgotten. Home. Sephew felt a mix of nervousness and relief as he agreed to the DNA test. He didn't care about money or property. All he wanted was the truth. For so many years he had lived in doubt, wondering who he really was and why his life had been filled with shame and pain. Now finally he had a chance to know. He sat quietly in the small laboratory room, his hands twisting nervously in his lap, while the nurse explained how the test would work. It felt surreal. Like a small paper could hold the answer to everything he had ever questioned about himself. Days later, the results arrived. Sephew held the envelope in trembling hands, his heart pounding as he opened it. The numbers and words stared back at him. 99.9% match. The man standing before him was his real father. The reality hit him in waves, shocked disbelief, and then a quiet, almost fragile joy. For the first time in his life, the pieces of the puzzle began to fit together. But there was no time to savor it. When Bayo learned the results, his face twisted with anger, his voice rising in panic and fury. He stormed into the room, waving papers, shouting that Sephew owed him for 18 years of food, a roof over his head, every small thing he had provided. His words tried to chain Sephew with guilt, to make him feel that gratitude meant silence and submission. But Sephew stood firm, refusing to bow to lies or manipulation. The room felt tight, tense, like the air itself had thickened. Witnesses around watched silently as Bayo's temper flared and his mask of control crumbled. The truth was a storm that could not be ignored, a force breaking through years of deceit. Sephew felt a surge of strength he had never known before. He realized that Bayo's threats, his anger, and his selfish claims could no longer touch him. The DNA test was not just proof, it was liberation. It had exposed lies that had haunted him. And now Sephew had a choice, to let the storm pass over him or to finally take his life back. Outside, the world seemed unchanged, but inside, everything had shifted. The path ahead would not be easy. Bayo would resist, try to manipulate, and fight for control. But Sephew had the truth now. And the truth was unstoppable. It was the first real step toward reclaiming himself, toward building a life where he was no longer defined by shame, or by someone else's cruelty. For the first time he could breathe freely, even as the storm raged around him. Sephew couldn't believe his eyes as Baiko opened a large, old wooden box and carefully pulled out stacks of letters, yellowed with age, tied together with faded ribbons. Each envelope was addressed to Tisa, written in Biko's careful handwriting, full of hope, love, and desperate longing. He explained to Sephew that he had sent these letters right after the accident that supposedly took his life. Every week, every month, every year, he had written about missing her, dreaming of the child they might have, begging for a chance to be part of her life. But none of the letters had ever reached her. Tisa's parents, strict and unyielding, had intercepted them, never giving her the truth. And Bayo, realizing she had no other family to turn to, had kept the letters hidden, ensuring she never heard Biko's words. Sephew hesitated at first, touching the envelopes gently, almost afraid of what he might find inside. Then slowly he began to read. Each letter was raw with emotion. Biko spoke of his love for Tisa, of the dreams they had shared, of the nights he had cried alone, imagining the child he would never hold. He wrote of hope, of regret, of the loneliness that had haunted him for 18 years. With every word Sephew read, a piece of his own heart shifted. He could feel the pain that had been stolen from him, the absence of a father who had wanted him, the lies he had been fed, the manipulations that shaped his childhood. His chest tightened, his eyes blurred, and he realized for the first time how much of his life had been built on deception. Every harsh word from Bayo, every moment of humiliation, every night of silent tears, it all had been built on a lie. He understood now why his mother had seemed so sad, so quiet, why she sometimes looked at him with hidden sorrow. She had been trapped, silenced, forced to live a life of compromise while Biko's love had been real and constant all along. Sephew's hands shook as he held the letters close to his chest. He felt anger, yes, but also a strange warmth, like discovering a missing piece of himself that he had always sensed but never touched. These letters were more than words. They were proof that someone had truly loved him, truly waited for him, and never stopped thinking about him. For the first time, Sephew felt the weight of betrayal and the depth of love at the same time. The childhood he thought he had lived, the family he thought he had, none of it had been real. And in that painful truth, something inside him began to shift. He wasn't just a victim of lies. He was now the keeper of the truth, the bridge between what was stolen from him and the life he could finally begin to claim. Sefiu sat in Biko's study, still holding the last of the letters close to his chest, when Biko leaned back and spoke in a quiet, serious tone. "There's something else you need to know," he said, reaching into a drawer and pulling out a thick folder. Sefiu opened it slowly, curiosity and fear twisting together inside him. Inside were legal papers, deeds, and official documents, proof that his grandfather had left an estate specifically for his first grandchild. The catch was, no one had known Sefiu existed, not even his grandfather. The papers listed property across the city, vast tracts of land in the countryside, investment accounts worth a fortune, and a family company that had been built over decades. Sefiu felt the words hit him like a wave. He had dreamed of finding his father, of finally being told he was wanted, but he had never imagined he could inherit all of this. For a moment, his mind raced with excitement, imagining the possibilities, the houses, the money, the freedom. But then a heavy weight settled over his chest. This was not what he had asked for. He had never wanted wealth. All he had wanted was love, a family that truly cared for him, a place where he could feel safe. Instead, the world now seemed to place him at the center of something he had never sought: power, responsibility, and conflict. He looked at Biko, who watched him calmly, understanding the storm of emotions running through him. Sefiu realized that inheriting this estate would mean facing his past, confronting Bayo, navigating business, and handling people who would try to manipulate or control him. He didn't know if he was ready for any of it. He felt a pang of anger, too. Anger at the life that had been stolen, at the lies that had built around him, at the people who had tried to keep him small while hiding the truth. Yet beneath the anger was a strange kind of relief, a feeling that finally, the truth had reached him. He was no longer just a boy lost in a cruel world. He was someone with a name, a history, and a right to claim it. Sefiu closed the folder slowly and let out a shaky breath. The weight of the inheritance was heavy, almost crushing, but he felt a small spark of clarity inside him. He didn't want to celebrate, didn't want the attention or the money. He just wanted to understand himself, to feel the love he had been denied, and to know that for the first time, his life could belong to him. Wealth, property, and status might be his by law, but Sefiu realized that true happiness, the kind he had been chasing all his life, came from healing, truth, and finally finding the family that truly cared. Everything else was just noise. The next morning, Sefiu thought the storm of his life might finally be settling, but it wasn't. Bayo appeared at Biko's grand estate, his face twisted with anger and entitlement. He didn't come quietly. He barged in, raising his voice immediately, demanding compensation for raising Sefiu, claiming he deserved custody rights, monthly payments, and even access to Biko's wealth, as if everything Biko had built could somehow repay him. His arrogance made Sefiu's blood boil. For years, Bayo had hidden behind his role as provider, pretending to care while tearing Sefiu down at every opportunity. He had humiliated him, lied to him, and made him feel worthless. And now he had the audacity to act as if he was owed anything. Sefiu stood silently at first, listening as Bayo ranted, counting the years of abuse in his mind, the nights he had cried alone, the birthday parties ruined, the insults whispered under the guise of discipline. Then finally Sefiu spoke, his voice steady but firm. "You didn't raise me. You tolerated me," he said. The words hung in the air, simple but cutting. There was no anger in the delivery, just truth, and it hit Bayo harder than anything Sefiu could have shouted. The room went silent. Tisa, who had been standing quietly beside her son, couldn't hold back anymore. Tears streamed down her face as she confessed the full truth, revealing the forced marriage, the lies her parents had orchestrated, and how Bayo had taken advantage of her grief. She spoke of love lost, of promises broken, of a son who deserved the care and affection that Bayo had never given. The more she spoke, the smaller Bayo seemed, his bravado crumbling with each word. Everyone present saw him for the first time, not as a father or provider, but as a man who had spent years manipulating and controlling, hiding cruelty behind the mask of responsibility. Sefiu felt a strange calm as he listened to his mother, realizing that the power Bayo thought he had was gone. The truth had been exposed, and it was undeniable. Bayo tried to argue, to twist the facts, but no one believed him anymore. Every lie he had told, every insult, every act of control, had been laid bare. Sephew didn't need to shout or fight. The evidence, the letters, the DNA test, and his mother's confession spoke for themselves. In that moment, Sephew felt a sense of freedom he had never known. He wasn't just standing up to his father. He was reclaiming his life, his dignity, and his right to peace. Bayo's presence no longer frightened him. The man who had once humiliated him was now powerless. And Sephew finally understood that some confrontations weren't won with anger or revenge. They were won simply by speaking the truth. Before the sun had even risen, Sephew was already awake, moving silently through his small room. The house felt heavy with memories, each corner holding a moment of pain, humiliation, or quiet suffering. He didn't shout, didn't argue, and didn't call anyone to watch him leave. There was no need for a scene. He simply began to pack a few belongings, clothes, a small bag of personal items, and the letters Baiko had given him. Each item he touched felt like a piece of the past he was finally letting go. On a small table, he left a single note, written neatly on plain paper, short and final. "You don't get to hurt me anymore." The words were simple, but they carried everything he felt: anger, hurt, and most importantly, freedom. He slipped the note into an envelope and placed it where his mother or Bayo might find it later, though he didn't care about their reactions. This departure wasn't about revenge or proving anything. It was about reclaiming himself. The streets were quiet as he walked toward Biko's car waiting outside. The cool morning air brushed against his face, a stark contrast to the suffocating tension he had left behind. Each step felt lighter than the one before, like he was shedding years of doubt and humiliation along the way. When he arrived at Biko's lakeside home, the sight of the calm water reflecting the soft dawn filled him with an unexpected sense of peace. The house was warm, welcoming, and quiet in a way that made his chest feel lighter. Baiko stood at the door, smiling gently, understanding without words the significance of this moment. For the first time, Sephew didn't feel like a boy being judged or punished. He felt like a son arriving where he truly belonged. The gentle lapping of the water and the soft glow of the rising sun seemed to wash away the years of neglect and lies. Sephew placed his bag down, breathing deeply, feeling the weight of the past finally begin to lift. He looked around at the home, at the lake, at the calmness surrounding him, and realized this was more than just a new place. It was the first real home he had ever known, a place without fear, without cruelty, a place where he could simply be himself. He didn't need to celebrate, didn't need to announce his arrival, didn't need anyone's approval. For the first time, Sephew felt a sense of safety and belonging that had always been denied to him. And in that quiet morning, as the world slowly woke around him, he understood something powerful. Leaving wasn't running away, and staying wasn't surviving. Moving toward peace, toward truth, toward love, that was finally living. Life at Biko's lakeside home was unlike anything Sephew had ever known. For the first time, he didn't have to tiptoe around adults, didn't have to brace for insults or cruel jokes, didn't have to fear that someone would humiliate him for being himself. Biko treated him not as a child who had been a burden, but as a son who deserved attention, guidance, and love. Every conversation was calm and patient. Every question he asked was answered. And for the first time, Sephew felt truly heard. It was a strange, new feeling, something he had longed for but never believed could exist. The house was quiet and safe, filled with light and warmth, a stark contrast to the chaos of his past. Slowly, he began to unpack more than just his belongings. He started unpacking the parts of himself that had been hidden, scared, and broken. Baiko didn't just offer comfort. He gave Sephew lessons in life. He introduced him to mentors who guided him on how to manage the inheritance, how to understand the responsibilities he now had, and how to carry himself with confidence. Business advisors taught him the practical side of the estate, but more importantly, Baiko taught him about their family's heritage, their culture, and the legacy that had been stolen from both of them. Each story, each lesson, each moment of patient teaching helped Sephew understand where he came from and what he was capable of. He began to see that his childhood, though stolen, didn't define him. He had the power to build something new, something real. He laughed again, small at first, then louder, more freely, as he shared meals, conversations, and quiet moments with Baiko. For the first time, he didn't feel alone. He felt supported, valued, and capable. Even the letters, once painful reminders of loss, now became symbols of hope and proof that love had existed, waiting for him. Every day, Sefiu's confidence grew, and with it a sense of peace he had never imagined. He no longer measured himself by the cruelty he had endured, but by the knowledge and love he was finally receiving. Healing wasn't instant, and some nights he still thought of the humiliation, the lies, and the pain. But with every morning, every lesson, every kind word, and every quiet moment by the lake, Sefiu felt stronger, more whole, and more ready to step into the life that had always been his right. He realized that real love didn't demand obedience, fear, or humiliation. It offered guidance, understanding, and space to grow. And in that safe, warm home, Sefiu finally began to heal the boy who had been lost for 18 long years. Months had passed since Sefiu moved into Biko's lakeside home, and he had grown stronger, more confident, and more certain of who he was. One evening, he attended a grand business gala hosted by Biko, a sparkling event filled with powerful people, shining lights, and soft music. Sefiu walked beside his father, calm and composed, dressed neatly, feeling the weight of responsibility he now carried, but also the strength that came from truth and love. He had learned patience, respect, and the quiet power of presence, and tonight, he was ready to step into the world as himself, not as the boy Beo had humiliated for 18 years. The gala was lively, with guests exchanging congratulations, handshakes, and smiles, but then the atmosphere shifted. Beo appeared at the entrance, his face red with anger, his voice loud and demanding. He tried to storm through, shouting that Sefiu belongs to him, that he had a right to claim his son and the wealth, as if the past 18 years of lies, cruelty, and manipulation gave him any claim. People stopped and stared, whispering to each other, the music fading under Beo's shouts. Security moved quickly, blocking his path, standing firm between him and the crowd. Beo's anger flared, but Sefiu didn't flinch. He didn't yell, didn't push back, didn't try to prove anything. Instead, he took a deep breath, looked straight at the man who had tried to destroy him for so many years, and spoke in a calm, steady voice. "You lost me long before today. Respect wasn't part of your language," he said. The words were simple but powerful, carrying the weight of every insult, every humiliation, and every year of stolen childhood. The room went quiet. Guests, business partners, and family members turned to watch, sensing the shift in power. Beo's face turned pale as he realized that his threats, his arrogance, and his past control no longer mattered. For the first time, he had no influence over Sefiu, no ability to intimidate or manipulate. The man who had tried to dominate him for years was now powerless, and all that remained was shame. Sefiu stood tall, steady, and unshaken, radiating confidence born from truth, love, and resilience. The crowd quietly acknowledged the change, the unspoken understanding that the boy who had been humiliated had grown into a man who could no longer be controlled. In that hall, under the sparkling lights and the watchful eyes of everyone present, Sefiu didn't just confront his father. He claimed his own life, his own dignity, and his rightful place in the world. Beo could shout, could argue, could try to regain control, but the truth was clear. Sefiu was free, respected, and untouchable. And for the first time, the power had completely shifted. Sefiu sat on the balcony of his new home, the early evening sun painting the sky in soft gold and pink. Below, the lake lay calm, its surface reflecting the quiet peace he had fought so long to find. He wasn't thinking about the wealth he had inherited or the grand house he now lived in. None of that mattered. What mattered was the stillness, the freedom from fear, the space to finally breathe. Beside him, Aisha, Biko's niece, leaned comfortably against the railing. She had been his first true friend, someone who saw him, understood him, and never judged him for the past he had endured. They sat together in silence, letting the quiet stretch between them, warm and comforting. Sefiu took a deep breath, feeling a weight lift from his chest. For 18 years he had been told he was a mistake, blamed for things he didn't do, humiliated and made to feel small. Now finally he understood the truth. He had not been a mistake. He had only been misplaced, sent into a life that tried to break him but couldn't. He had survived every insult, every lie, every cruel word, and now he was whole. He looked out at the lake again, the water shimmering like a mirror, and whispered softly, almost to himself, "I wasn't a mistake. I was misplaced, and I finally found where I belong." There was no bitterness in his voice, no longing for revenge, no need to prove anything. The boy who had once run from humiliation was gone. In his place sat a young man who had claimed his life, piece by piece, heart by heart. The past had shaped him, but it no longer controlled him. Sefyu didn't need drama or confrontation to feel powerful. Peace was stronger than any anger, calmer than any victory won in battle. He leaned back, letting the cool evening breeze brush across his face, and felt the fullness of freedom for the first time. Aisha smiled at him, understanding without words, sharing the quiet triumph of simply being safe, seen and loved. Sefyu knew the journey wasn't over. He would continue to learn, grow and heal. But for the first time, he was in charge of his story. No one could hurt him again, and he could finally live on his own terms. The sun dipped lower, casting long shadows across the balcony, and Sefyu allowed himself to feel content, strong and free. Everything stolen from him, love, family, peace, he was slowly reclaiming. And here, in the quiet light, overlooking the lake, surrounded by the warmth of someone who truly cared, he understood what it meant to belong. This was his life now, rebuilt with truth, with love, and with a heart that finally knew it was safe. That if you were captivated by Sefyu's journey from pain to peace, don't just scroll away. Hit like, share, and comment your thoughts. Tell us how you'd reclaim your life if someone tried to steal your happiness. And don't forget to subscribe for more stories that will touch your heart, inspire your soul, and show you that no matter what they say, your worth is yours to claim.